Hello and welcome to Sunday Storytime. Today is the third of our stories by Daniel Morden, and it comes from this book, Dark Tales from the Woods. I first came across this story at an event at Baglan Library, where Daniel mesmerised us with a wonderful storytelling. I have loved this story ever since. It is The Leaves Are Hung, but Never Grew. There was once a weeping house. The dog wept in the yard. The master wept in the study. Upstairs, a young man sat at the end of his bed and wept. Day after day he sat, his right hand curled into a fist. He wept because he had forgotten everything. He wept for some awful misfortune he could no longer remember. One evening, a young lass walked up the drive. Her clothes were no more than tatty rags. She walked barefoot. Her hair was clogged with twigs and leaves. The dog paid her no heed. He lay whining in his muddy puddle. The girl knocked at the door. A sobbing servant fetched her in to see the master. He looked up from his weeping, dabbing his eyes with his handkerchief. She said, "I've heard tell of your son from the people of the village. I've heard tell that if any woman can make your son smile, she can have him. I will try. And if I fail, I don't know what I'll do." The master looked her up and down. Then he said, "Many women have come here, fine women, ladies, who wanted nothing except a fine husband. They tried everything, singing, tickling, taking him into the sunshine, everything. All of them tried and failed. You have as much right to take your turn as those women. I wish you luck." The sobbing servant took her upstairs. There sat the young man. His face was grey. There were grooves in his cheeks from all the tears he had cried. The servant had put a bucket under his chin. The young woman began to speak. As she spoke, his tears plopped into the bucket. "What cause have you to cry? You live here in this fine house. You have riches and servants. I have nothing. Nothing in the world. My mother and father are both gone. I have only the clothes I wear. Listen to me now as I tell you a tale to pass the evening. Perhaps it'll stop one little tear." Once, not so long ago, a young woman called Anwen lived with her mother. They were so poor they had to share a bed. One night, Anwen had a strange dream. She dreamed she could search until she found the leaves are hung but never grew. Next morning, she told her mother about this dream. Her mother sighed. "If you have had a dream, you've had a dream. If you've set your heart on going a-travelling, I can't stop you. But be careful. Sometimes the world is not as it seems. If you see something you don't understand, watch. Wait before you speak." Anwen kissed her mother, and off she went. She walked and walked until one evening she came to a strange house. Behind the house there was a hill. On that hill there was a tree, and the tree was silhouetted against a red sky. The tree had 7 branches, and each branch had 1 twig. Each twig had 1 leaf. Outside the house, Anwen saw an old woman. "Hello, my dear," she said. "Are you hungry?" "What kind of world would it be if I didn't have enough for one such as you. Come inside. Anwen said yes. She was hungry and went in. It was a strange place. Half of it was like any other home. The other half was a stinking pigsty. Slobbering and snorting, chained in the corner, was an enormous black boar. It squealed and strained at his chain when it saw Anwen. The old woman had a scrawny daughter. Anwen felt fat beside her. The old woman shouted, "Bag of bones! Make yourself useful! Put the kettle on the fire!" The daughter flinched and scurried this way and that. The old woman threw a heavy serving spoon at her, and it bounced off her back. But she smiled at Anwen and said, "I bet you're exhausted. Sit down, please." Anwen sat and ate and drank. She told the old woman she had nothing in the world, and that she'd set off to make her fortune. The old woman said, "You can see I need an extra pair of hands here. My stupid idle daughter couldn't boil a pot of water. I'll give you whatever I can spare if you can sweep the floor, keep the fire alight, and feed the boar each night." Anwen thanked her. She said she'd be glad to stay. The days turned to weeks. Every day, Anwen swept the floor, fed the boar, and kept the fire alight. She lived well. The old woman gave her plenty of food and drink, and she insisted Anwen cleared her plate. For the first time, there was flesh on Anwen's bones. But if ever her own daughter asked for a morsel more food, the old woman bounced a pot or a pan off her back. It was hard for Anwen to fill her belly, while the spindly daughter of the house followed her every forkful. Each evening, Anwen would stare at the strange tree with its 7 bony branches. But she was careful. She remembered her mother's advice and said never a word about it. Until one day, while the old woman and her daughter were outside, as she fed the boar, she said, "Months have gone by, and I don't know if I'm any closer to finding the leaves that hung but never grew. What should I do?" The boar lifted its bristly head and answered, "At last, you have spoken to me. I had lost hope that you would never ever do so. Now I can speak. Listen to me. The leaves on that tree are the leaves you seek. I was searching for them too. As a young man, I came here and asked if I could have the leaves. She, the old woman, is a witch. She spelled me into a boar. Next month, when I'm nice and fat, they will eat me. And guess who they will spell next? You'll be a pig in the corner unless you steal those leaves and flee this place." That night, Anwen crept outside and stole the magic leaves. With the first magic leaf, she touched the boar, and there, before her, was a fine young man. With the second leaf, she touched the poker, the broom, and the chair. Then she and the young man fled. Next morning, the witch called to Anwen from her bed. "My dear, what are you doing?" The poker answered, "I am raking the fire." So the witch rolled over and went back to sleep. The witch woke up a second time and called again. "My dear, what are you doing?" This time the broom answered, "I'm sweeping the house." So the witch rolled over and went back to sleep. Later still, the witch woke up again and called, "My dear, what are you doing?" The chair said, "I'm coming now." The witch waited. And when didn't come, the witch looked through her window. There were no leaves on the tree. "Daughter, you miserable bag of bones! Anwen has freed the boar and stolen the leaves. Get after them. Get on the road and bring back whatever you find." Off went the daughter, running as swift as the wind. Anwen heard her coming. She took out the third leaf. "We must hide. You will be a pond and I will be a duck." Bag of Bones came to a duck pond. "A little duck, have you seen a young woman pass this way?" But the duck dipped under the water. Bag of Bones went home. "Well," said her mother, "I saw nothing, only a little duck in a pond." "That was them! Get me just one feather from that duck and I'll have them both in a blink." Bag of Bones ran back, but there was no duck and no pond. Off she went. Anwen heard the witch's daughter chasing them, swift as the wind. Soon she would catch them. Anwen took out the fourth leaf. "I'll be a rose and you be a bee." Bag of Bones came to a rose bush. "Pretty bee, did you see a young woman pass this way?" But the bee disappeared into the petals of the rose. Bag of Bones went home. "Well," said her mother, "I saw nothing, only a bee on a rose." "That was them! Get me just one petal from that rose and I'll have them both in a blink." Bag of Bones ran and ran, but she found no rose, no bee. After them she went. Anwen could hear her gaining. She took out the fifth leaf. "You be a tree and I'll be an apple." Bag of Bones came to an apple tree. "Sweet apple, did you see a young woman pass this way?" But the apple only swayed on its stalk. Bag of Bones went home. "Well?" "I saw nothing, only a red-cheeked apple on a tree." "That was them! Just one leaf from that tree and I'd have caught them both in a blink. If you want something done, you must do it yourself." She pushed her daughter aside, and after them she went, as swift as thought. Anwen heard the witch approaching. They came to a fork in the road. She gave the young man the sixth leaf, and kept the seventh. She said, "You go that way, I'll go this way. Meet me here in a week. If you get home, do not let anyone kiss you. If you are kissed, then you will forget me immediately." The young woman ran to the left, the young man to the right. She looked over her shoulder, and there was a spidery grey hand reaching for her hair. She threw the leaf to the ground. The witch saw it and tried to turn her foot, but it was too late. She trod on the leaf and was changed into a pig. Meanwhile, the young man arrived at his home. His dog lifted her head and sniffed the air. Joyfully, she rushed toward her master. Before he could push her away, she jumped up and licked his face. In an instant, he forgot everything. His father saw him through the window and ran out and embraced his son. "We thought you were dead. Where have you been?" "I don't know where I've been. I don't know who I am. I can't remember anything. A week later, Anwen waited at the crossroads. No one came. She went home. As she approached the little hut where she lived, she saw no chickens, no smoke from the chimney. She opened the door. Her mother was gone. Anwen buried her. Afterwards, she couldn't bear to stay in that place. She took to wandering. She slept in barns and under hedges. She lived on berries and nuts. Her hair clogged into clumps. Her clothes became greasy rags. She was as bony as a whisper. She came to a village. An old man took pity on her and gave her bread to eat and tea to drink. As she ate and drank, he told her all the gossip. She heard of a fine house where the young man had been struck down with a strange affliction. Once it had been a happy place. Now even the pigeons on the gutters wept. The master of the house had proclaimed if any woman could make his son smile, she could have him. Anwen went to the house and tried her luck. The young man stared at her in amazement. He smiled. He opened his hand. She saw a leaf. And that was a story from this book, Dark Tales from the Woods. I hope you enjoyed that Sunday story time. I shall join you next week for another Sunday story. Until then, bye for now.